All right, let's get started learning about the fundamentals of nutrition. This picture is a copy of the 13th edition of your textbook by Sizer and Whitney. I think you'll find it to be an intuitive textbook and lots of detail. We will cover the key points in the textbook, and then I will look to you to browse it and find the interesting things that you might have questions on and bring those up in discussion boards as appropriate. Definition of nutrition: the study of what we eat, the foods and their nutrients, of course, why we're eating them, how those nutrients are used in our bodies, and then how those nutrients affect our health and disease risk. This interesting diagram outlines some of those key factors that make nutrition such an area of interest, and many people are always seeking out. If you go in the bookstore, there's hundreds of books on weight loss and how to optimize your nutrition. And part of it's because of what we see in this diagram. There's a lot of features to nutrition that complicate it or make it a difficult area for people to manage. We look at the factors that affect our food choice. Is the food available? What influences our idea of what should be eaten at a certain time of day or a certain place? Is it just because we drove past it in the street and it was the most convenient one for us to grab? We'll explore that and make sure you take a look in your textbook in that section to read about those details before you post in the discussion board this week that deals with food choices. Next, we identify the chemical components of the food, which is so important for all of us to get at least a foundational grip on what is in those foods and why would we want to choose one over the other. Once we get those nutrients in our body, then how are the actions of those food chemicals affecting our health and disease risk? Let's define essential nutrient. It's a chemical substance the body can't make for itself. Therefore, it must be obtained from the food that we eat to prevent deficiency diseases. Now, certain nutrients your body can produce, but they might not be able to produce it fast enough from raw material to always prevent deficiency. So that also makes it an essential nutrient. Here's a quote from 1825. It says, "Tell me what you eat and I will tell you who you are." This came out of a French lawyer, of all people, who wrote a book called Physiology of Taste. I think these little details are kind of fun to look back into and see, gee, all the way back in 1825, before nutrition was really even looked at as a science, there was somebody who had this insight. And he had a good insight that actually applies now when we dig further into the science of nutrition. When we take food into our body, we digest it, we break it down into smaller bits, and we isolate those nutrients to be absorbed into our system. Those nutrients are then rearranged to produce the cells of our body, which sustain life for us. An example of this might be the fats in our diet absolutely affect how we form that cell membrane. Lipid is one component of all cell membranes. So the type of fat in our diet affects the type of lipid that ends up in those cell membranes. Now, we need nutrients to promote three areas. One is growth. If you do not have those nutrients available at a time when a child is going through a large growth spurt, when we're very young, kids can grow 1 inch to 2 inches in a few months. And if we don't have those nutrients needed for that growth at the time that their body's hormones and other factors are ready for the growth, then they'll have what we call stunted growth. They'll have a reduced reaction to the body's desire to grow. Next is maintenance. If you don't know it already, you should know that the cells in our body are turning over all the time. For instance, our GI tract, the cells turn over every 3 days. So in that process, if your body's producing a new cell for the GI tract lining and we don't have the right nutrients available in our diet because we're not eating well, it's going to be compromised structure to our GI tract. Lastly, repair. Examples of this might be a broken bone or a cut that we sustain from an injury And our body needs to have nutrients available to rebuild that tissue, rebuild that bone. Let's look at the basic nutrients. There's 6 of them. Make sure you're taking note of what they are. First and most important would be water. Yes, we're in a drought right now. We need to make sure we're always getting adequate amounts of water. The next 3 are the energy-yielding nutrients. We also call them the macronutrients. You've probably heard that term before. Carbohydrates is the first. We use CHO as an abbreviation for carbohydrate because carbohydrates made up of C for carbon, H for hydrogen, and O for oxygen. So CHO is an abbreviation you'll see me use throughout the term. Next is protein. The third energy-yielding nutrient is fat or lipid. The last 2 nutrients, we call them helper nutrients, vitamins and minerals. Make sure you know these 6 basic nutrients. Let's delve in deeper in each of these nutrients. First, water. It's indispensable. We need about 2 to 3 liters a day for good health. So what that translates into in everyday practice would be drinking about 8 to 12 cups of water a day. And yes, it's true. We have water in the foods that we eat as well. But as a general guideline, I would still advise most people sticking with around 8 to 10 cups of fluid intake a day. It provides a medium for the body's chemical reactions. It helps us with temperature regulation, like this poor man in the picture who's profusely sweating. He needs that water on the outside of his body to help bring down. Obviously, he looks like he's hot or maybe stressed. But if it's a heat problem, that water on top of the skin, when it evaporates, in that evaporation process, the heat or energy is removed from the body, which cools the body down. Our body's made up of 50 to 60% water. Let's talk about energy. Energy is provided in the foods that we eat, and it gives us what we need to perform activity. But let's broaden the thought process on what is activity. It includes things that we think of as exercise, like walking, running, riding a bike, but also the bigger bulk of where we're spending energy in our body is for the fundamental functions like breathing, our heart beating, our brain function. We need energy for all of those. As we look into a project later in the semester called the Metabolism Study, you'll explore your own energy needs. Let's talk about how we measure energy in the nutrition world. We measure it as calories. A calorie is the amount of energy it takes to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water 1 degree centigrade. Yeah, there's these little things called a Baum calorimeter. I have a picture of it on your slide. And we actually did this in my nutritional biochem class in my master's program, where we learn about exactly how. We put a little piece of food, piece of meat is what we used in ours, and what we call the Baum calorimeter. And we measure how much heat does it put off, and that tells us how many calories it has when it's burned. You'll see on my slide I have kilocalories equals kcals equals calories. Now, in the true scientific world, kilocalorie is different than a calorie, but we will use those terms interchangeably in this course, and in most food labeling and language, you'll hear people use those interchangeably. Now let's dig deeper into the energy-yielding nutrients. Carbohydrate, it gives us how much energy? 4 calories for every gram that we eat. Same for protein, 4 calories for every gram. Fat, you get a double on that, 9 calories for every gram. So much more calorie dense for every gram. That's one of the reasons that fat has always gotten a bad reputation when it comes to weight management. But what we're learning is it's super important to keep the fat in there for satiety reasons, but the type of fat we're choosing is what's key. Okay, the last energy providing compound in our diet we sometimes call a toxin is alcohol. It gives us 7 calories per gram. Make sure you're familiar with how much each of the macronutrients provide in calories for every gram. We'll be practicing later how do we calculate how much energy is in a food if we only know how many grams of carbohydrate or fat it has. Vitamins. We've got something that's vital for life, meaning if we don't have it, we can't sustain a healthy life. They're organic compounds. They're much smaller than the macronutrients. They're destructible, so it does matter how we treat our food as to how we maximize the vitamin content. There's two categories, water-soluble and fat-soluble. Next up are minerals. Minerals are inorganic. They're smaller. As a compound, they're smaller than vitamins. Now, we don't consider them destructible, but the charge can change depending on how we are eating that food. One of the minerals that we commonly will talk about with this is iron. That concludes our slideshow. I'd like you to go ahead and make sure you read the portion of your text that matches what we just talked about.